A millionaire sought her for just one night, but after learning she was untouched, he made a shocking offer. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Tonight, high above the city lights, the Hale Tower lounge glowed like a warm ember against the cold New York skyline. Soft jazz curled through the air, glasses clinked, and conversations drifted like smoke. Lena Ward walked through the entrance with the careful steps of someone who did not belong in a place this expensive. The dim gold lighting brushed over her simple navy dress, the one she bought on clearance last winter. Her hands tightened on the strap of her purse as she scanned the room. She was here for one reason only: to deliver a misplaced item to a hotel guest who had left without paying. It was supposed to be a quick errand, nothing more. But fate had other plans. Near the corner window, Adrian Hale stood alone, framed by the night sky. 6'2", tailored charcoal suit, posture effortlessly commanding. People moved around him with subtle respect, yet he remained distant, untouched by everything around him. His expression was unreadable, sharp and cool, the kind of face that carried both power and solitude. Lena approached him hesitantly. His presence unsettled her in a way that she could not explain. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Mr. Hale?" He looked at her slowly, his deep brown eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Yes. And you are?" "Lena Ward. I work at the Crescent Hotel. You left without signing for the item you received earlier." She held out the envelope with both hands, trying not to reveal how nervous she felt. Adrian did not take the envelope. Instead, his gaze lingered on her face. It was not flirtation. It was calculation, as if he were evaluating something silently. Then, with a tone that carried dangerous confidence, he said, "Sit with me, just for a moment." Lena blinked, startled. "Sir, I cannot. I only came to—" "You can," he interrupted, "and you will be perfectly safe, I promise you that." Reluctantly, she sat, her heart hammered in her chest. She did not understand why he wanted her here. She did not understand why he looked at her as though she mattered. The server approached. Adrian ordered a drink for himself, then looked at her. "Anything for you?" "I am working," she whispered. "I cannot drink." He studied the tremble in her hands. "You are scared." "I am not scared," she said, though her voice betrayed her. A faint smile crossed his lips. "Most women who sit here want something from me, but you only want to leave." "I really should," she said, starting to stand. That was when everything shifted. As she rose, the strap of her purse slipped, spilling its contents across the polished table. A small silver cross necklace tumbled forward, the one her late father gave her. Adrian reached out and picked it up, pausing when he saw how carefully she watched him hold it. Something in her eyes, fear, purity, and pride woven together, struck him like a blow. "You have never done this before," he said quietly, his voice lower, more serious. She froze. "Done what?" "Been with a man for one night." Her breath caught, stunned that he had sensed the truth so effortlessly. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The air around them tightened. Whatever intention he had when she walked in, it vanished. In its place, a new thought formed behind his eyes. One bold, one reckless, one that would alter both their lives. "Lena Ward," he said, voice steady, "I cannot take you for one night." She blinked, confused. "But," he continued, "I can make you an offer, one that will change everything." And in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lena stared at Adrian, unsure if she had heard him correctly. The entire lounge seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them at the corner table overlooking the city. She felt her pulse in her throat, her palms cold against the edge of the chair. "A life-changing offer?" she whispered. Adrian did not smile. He did not soften. He simply watched her with the same unwavering intensity as before, as if he could see straight through the panic rising in her chest. "Yes," he said, "but not here. Sit." Something about the way he said it, steady but not forceful, made her lower herself back into the seat, even though her instincts screamed to run. He folded his hands on the table. "Tell me, Lena, Why does a young woman work 2 shifts and still come running across the city to deliver a form that most guests would ignore? Her breath hitched. She had never told him she worked 2 shifts. She never even said where she came from before arriving at the hotel. Yet he read it from her appearance, her cautious manner, the exhaustion beneath her eyes. She felt exposed, almost embarrassed. "I just needed the hours," she murmured. "That is all." That was not all, and they both knew it. Her mind raced through the truth she hid under her calm exterior, the growing medical bills for her mother, the threat from her landlord, the sudden cut in her working hours at the hotel, the way she had stood in front of the utility company office 2 days ago, begging for one more extension on a bill she could not pay. She remembered the way the clerk had looked at her with boredom, as if her life mattered no more than a form on a desk. Adrian watched the emotions flicker across her face like reflections on a window. "You are carrying more than you admit," he said quietly. Lena swallowed. "Everyone is." He leaned back. "Perhaps, but not everyone hides it as well as you do." The server returned, placing Adrian's drink on the table. Lena clasped her hands to keep them steady. She hated that this stranger, this man who existed in a world of penthouses and private drivers, could read her so easily. It made her feel small. It made her feel seen. And that, somehow, was even more frightening. "Lena," he said, his tone shifting, "I want you to listen carefully. What I am about to propose will sound unreasonable. It will sound impossible. But it will solve everything that is weighing you down." Her heart tightened. "Sir, I did not come here for money." "I know," he replied. "That is why I chose you." The words struck something deep inside her. She had been dismissed by managers, ignored by customers, overshadowed by people louder and richer. Yet this man, this millionaire who could have anything he wanted, looked at her as if she were the only person who mattered in the entire room. Adrian continued. "You are genuine. You are honest. You carry your responsibilities with dignity, and you walked into this tower tonight with no interest in my wealth." He paused, his voice lowering. "I respect that." Lena looked down at her purse, at the small silver cross now tucked safely inside. Her father had given it to her when she was 15. For strength, he had said. She wondered now if he had known how much she would need it. Adrian's gaze sharpened. "I will ask you a single question. Answer honestly. Are you drowning, Lena?" She opened her mouth to deny it, to pretend she was fine, to cling to her pride. But the truth rose before she could stop it. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." Adrian nodded slowly, as if that was the answer he expected. "Good," he said. "Then you are ready to hear what comes next." And with those words, Lena felt the ground shift beneath her feet, as if she were standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything she knew about her life, and about his. Lena sat completely still, her breath trapped somewhere between her ribs and her throat. Adrian did not raise his voice, but the weight of his presence filled the space between them. The soft jazz in the lounge continued as if nothing world-shifting was happening at their table. Adrian reached inside his suit jacket and placed a slim black folder on the table. It looked expensive, structured, and deliberate. He pressed it toward her with 2 fingers. "This," he said calmly, "is the offer." Lena did not touch it. She stared at the folder as if one wrong move would set it on fire. "I told you," she whispered. "I did not come to make a deal." "And I told you," Adrian replied, "that you are not here for money. That is why this is not a payment. It is a proposition." She swallowed, her voice barely steady. "What kind of proposition?" "A 6-month marriage." The words landed like a silent explosion. She blinked, certain she had misheard him. Marriage?" "Yes." His gaze remained steady, unwavering. "A legal, documented, public marriage. One that will end after 6 months, with both of us walking away in peace." Lena shook her head. "That is impossible. Why would you ever ask that of a stranger?" Adrian took a slow breath, his tone shifting into something more vulnerable, though still guarded. "Because my board of directors is attempting to push through a merger that would grant them partial control of my company. They are using my personal life as leverage. According to them, a single man is unstable, unfocused, an unpredictable risk." He paused, tapping the folder once. "A marriage demonstrates stability. A wife demonstrates credibility. It neutralizes the board's attempts to undermine me." Lena felt dizzy. "So you want a wife to fix a business situation?" I want a partner in an arrangement that benefits us both, he corrected. You gain financial security. I gain protection from corporate vultures. She stared at him, stunned by the sheer magnitude of what he was suggesting. Why me? Because you are untouched by my world. You are not manipulative. You do not chase power. You do not bend for wealth. And the fact that you refused a simple night with me tells me you value yourself more than you admit. His eyes softened, just slightly. That is exactly the type of woman I can trust to enter a contract without hidden motives. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the folder without meaning to. What is inside? The terms. Adrian opened the folder for her, turning it toward her side of the table. She read the first lines, her eyes widening. Rule 1. No romantic expectations. Rule 2. No physical intimacy required. Rule 3. Attend 5 corporate and family events as my spouse. Rule 4. Maintain privacy regarding the agreement. Rule 5. After 6 months, both parties will part ways with no obligations. Lena stared at the final line, her voice trembling. You even wrote, no intimacy. Yes, Adrian said firmly. I will never take advantage of you. Not then, not now, not ever. The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. This man, powerful beyond anything she had ever known, was offering her safety inside a deal that would tie their lives together. The thought terrified her, but the thought of going back to her collapsing world terrified her even more. Adrian closed the folder gently. You do not need to decide tonight, but know this, Lena Ward. His voice lowered. I chose you for this because you have more strength than you allow yourself to see. She looked up at him, shaken to her core. And if I say no, she whispered. Adrian held her gaze. Then you walk out of this tower, and I will never bother you again. The silence stretched between them, charged and fragile, until Lena realized she was no longer breathing. This was no longer about a contract. It was about a decision that would change the course of 2 very different lives. Lena did not remember leaving the Hale Tower lounge that night. All she remembered was the cold air against her cheeks, the thrum of traffic below, and the black folder pressed tightly to her chest as if it were a living thing. She barely slept, turning the proposal over and over in her mind until dawn crept across her window. By morning, she expected herself to laugh at the idea, tear up the folder, and pretend none of it had happened. But instead, she found herself standing outside the Hale Tower again, the sun reflecting off the glass like a warning she chose to ignore. Adrian was already waiting in the lobby, hands in his pockets, posture straight, expression unreadable. When he saw her, he did not look surprised. He simply nodded, as if he had known she would return. You came, he said quietly. I came to understand, she replied, though her voice was softer than she intended. He motioned toward the private elevator. Then let us begin. The doors closed behind them with a soft hum. Lena watched the floors rise rapidly, feeling the same uneasy flutter she felt the night before. Adrian stood beside her, calm, composed, and impossibly self-assured. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a penthouse that looked like the inside of a luxury magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble counters, a sweeping view of the city stretching to the Hudson River. This is not part of the contract, Adrian said, noticing her awe. This is only for preparation. Preparation for what? She asked. He gestured toward a set of double doors. For stepping into my world. The doors opened, and a small team entered the room. A stylist with measuring tape around her neck. A hair consultant with a sleek case of tools. A voice and etiquette coach with a tablet in her hands. Lena stepped back instinctively. I do not need all of this. Lena, Adrian said, his tone firm but steady. If you stand beside me as my wife, even temporarily, you will face people who will judge you within seconds. This is not about changing who you are. It is about protecting you from a world that can be cruel. The sincerity in his voice disarmed her, and so, reluctantly, she agreed. The next hours unfolded in a blur. Fabric swatches brushed against her skin. She learned the difference between diamond cuts and why certain gowns were chosen for certain events. She stood in front of mirrors while the stylist adjusted hems and pinned temporary modifications to dresses that cost more than her yearly salary. Lena stumbled through her first lesson in formal posture, nearly tripping in heels until Adrian, observing from across the room, stepped forward and steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "You are not required to be perfect," he said softly. "Just confident." She nodded, cheeks warm. The etiquette coach taught her how to navigate a gala without looking overwhelmed, how to handle conversations with board members, how to politely reject invasive questions, how to smile just enough to appear approachable without encouraging the wrong kind of attention. Lena practiced each movement until her legs trembled. During a short break, she stood near the window, watching the city stretching endlessly below. "This feels unreal," she whispered. Adrian joined her, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. "It will feel real soon enough," he said. "But remember this, Lena. You are not becoming someone else. You are learning how to walk into a room that was designed to keep people like you out." She looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "And if I fail?" she asked. He shook his head. "You will not." There was no arrogance in his answer, only certainty. And for the first time since the contract was placed in her hands, Lena felt a small, unfamiliar flicker inside her chest, something that felt dangerously close to trust. The following evening arrived faster than Lena expected. She had spent the entire day in preparation, but nothing could quiet the storm inside her chest as the black car pulled up to the entrance of the Hale Foundation gala. Flashing lights, a long red carpet, crowds dressed in gowns and tuxedos that looked like they came straight from the glossy pages of a magazine. Adrian stepped out first, calm, controlled. Every inch the Millionaire CEO people admired and feared. When the door opened for Lena, he extended his hand to her. She hesitated only a second before placing her trembling fingers into his steady palm. "You look striking," he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear. The compliment felt unreal. "I am trying not to fall," she whispered back. "You will not," he answered, guiding her toward the entrance. The moment they stepped inside, attention shifted toward them like a tide changing direction. Lena felt it instantly, the weight of eyes examining her dress, her posture, her presence at Adrian Hale's side. She remembered her training and lifted her chin just enough to appear confident. But confidence did not stop the whispers. "Who is she? She looks too young. She is not from our circle. Another temporary fascination?" Lena tried to ignore them, but the words felt like needles brushing her skin. Adrian noticed the tension in her shoulders and leaned closer. "Eyes on me," he murmured. "Nothing else matters." She nodded, focusing on the warmth of his hand guiding her forward. It steadied her more than she expected. They approached a group of board members, all dressed in expensive suits, their smiles sharp and practiced. One of them, a woman with diamond earrings big enough to catch the chandelier light, eyed Lena from head to toe. "So," the woman said, "this is the mystery wife-to-be. Interesting choice, Adrian." Lena forced a polite smile. The etiquette coach's lessons echoed in her mind. Stay poised, do not retreat, hold your ground with grace. "Interesting good, or interesting unexpected?" Lena asked gently. The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting her to respond. "Unexpected, of course. Adrian usually associates with women who understand his world." Lena felt the implication. It stung, but she refused to show it. "I may not understand everything yet," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. "But I am a fast learner, and Adrian has been very patient." A few board members exchanged surprised glances. Adrian's lips lifted slightly, the closest thing to a smile she had seen from him in public. The woman pressed on. "Forgive me, dear, but your dress, it seems a bit modest for an evening like this." Lena inhaled slowly. "I chose it because I wanted to feel like myself tonight. I hope that is acceptable enough for the room." The answer was simple, but the honesty behind it disarmed the entire circle. One of the older board members chuckled in approval. "Well said," he remarked. "Confidence suits you." For the first time that night, Lena felt a quiet surge of pride. She had not impressed them with wealth or pedigree. She had impressed them by standing her ground. Adrian leaned slightly toward her, his voice warm. "You handled that perfectly." "I am still shaking," she whispered. "That is what makes it impressive," he replied. As the night continued, Lena found her rhythm. She greeted donors, accepted compliments gracefully, and stood beside Adrian without shrinking back. She could feel the shift in the room. People were no longer staring with skepticism. They were watching with curiosity and a hint of respect. Near the end of the event, Adrian placed his hand gently at the small of her back, guiding her toward the exit. "You passed your first test," he said softly. Lena exhaled, relief loosening her shoulders. "I did not know it was a test." "It always is," he replied. "In this world, everything is." But then he paused, looking down at her with an expression she had not seen before, something softer, something deeper. "You were magnificent, Lena." And for the first time since the contract entered her life, she wondered if she was beginning to step into this world not as a disguise, but as someone who belonged beside him. The car ride back to the penthouse was quiet, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that carried words neither of them dared to speak yet. The city passed by in streaks of gold and navy through the windows, and Lena watched her reflection tremble faintly against the glass. She was still replaying the gala in her mind, the harsh looks, the unexpected respect, the board members' surprise at her confidence. She had walked into that room feeling like a shadow, and somehow walked out feeling visible. Adrian broke the silence first. "You surprised them," he said, his tone thoughtful. "I surprised myself," she admitted. The corner of his mouth lifted. "Good. That means you were not pretending." The car slowed in front of Hale Tower. A doorman greeted them, and Adrian placed a guiding hand on Lena's back as they walked inside. It was a small gesture, but she felt the warmth of it through the fabric of her dress. When they reached the penthouse, the door closed behind them with a soft click. The quiet inside the space was deeper than the quiet in the car. It felt almost intimate. Lena walked toward the window, still wearing the gown the stylist had pinned and tailored for her, the hem brushing lightly against the polished floor. City lights sparkled beneath them like scattered diamonds. "I did not think I would make it through the night," she said softly. Adrian loosened his tie, observing her with an expression she could not decode. "You did more than make it through. You stood your ground." She looked down at her hands. "I was shaking the entire time." "That is what courage looks like," he replied. "Courage is doing the thing even when you are shaking." The sincerity in his voice startled her. Adrian Hale rarely offered softness. Tonight she saw something new in him. He walked closer, stopping just beside her. The distance between them felt both safe and charged. "Lena," he said, "there is something you should understand about me." She turned to him, waiting. "I do not trust easily, and I do not let people close. Not anymore." There was no bitterness in his tone, only truth, a truth she sensed was rarely shared with anyone. She spoke gently. "Someone hurt you." The silence that followed was answer enough. Adrian exhaled, his gaze drifting to the city below. "I built walls because it was easier than being vulnerable. In my world, vulnerability is seen as weakness, and weakness is exploited." Lena studied him in the dim light. The powerful CEO who had commanded a room full of elites now looked like a man carrying the weight of past betrayal. "You are not weak," she said quietly. "You are human." His eyes shifted to her, and for the first time she saw something fragile behind his guarded exterior. "And you," he said, "are not the woman I expected to stand beside me, but tonight you proved you can." She felt her heart tighten, not from fear this time, but from something warm and uninvited. "I am trying," she whispered. "You are doing more than trying," he said. "You are becoming someone I respect." The word hung in the air, heavier than either of them anticipated. Respect. It was not part of the contract. It was not required. It was real. A soft breeze pressed against the windows, carrying the faint hum of the city. Lena looked back out at the skyline, but she was aware of every breath Adrian took beside her. For the first time since the arrangement began, the world did not feel divided between his world and hers. For a moment, they were simply two people, standing in the soft glow of a city that did not know their secret. Two people who were beginning to feel something that had never been written into the contract at all. The next morning began quietly, almost gently. Lena prepared coffee in the penthouse kitchen, still wrapped in the glow of the previous night's connection. For the first time, the space did not feel cold or intimidating. It felt warmer, lived in, shared. But that warmth did not last long. Adrian entered the room with his phone pressed to his ear, his expression sharpened into the familiar, unreadable mask he wore at the gala. When he ended the call, he placed the phone on the counter with a controlled firmness. "What happened?" Lena asked. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There is a situation. Someone leaked footage from the night we met." Her stomach dropped. "Footage? From the hotel lounge?" "Yes." The doorbell chimed before he could explain further. His assistant, Daniel, stepped inside with a tablet in hand. "It is already spreading," Daniel said. "Blogs, gossip accounts, business circles. They are spinning the story fast." He tapped the screen, and a headline appeared. "Millionaire heiress hunter? Mysterious woman rejects Adrian Hale's one-night offer before securing marriage contract." Lena felt her knees weaken. "That is not what happened. That is not what happened at all." Daniel continued. "They are framing her as someone who used her innocence to manipulate you into the arrangement." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Who leaked this?" "We suspect Victoria," Daniel said quietly. "She was at the gala. She has motive. She knows the board wants a reason to discredit you." The name struck Lena like cold water. Victoria, the ex who once belonged to Adrian's world. The woman who watched Lena with cutting disdain all evening. Lena stepped back, her breath shaking. "People will think I trapped you. They will think I am exactly what she said." "You are not," Adrian said firmly. "But you cannot say that publicly," she whispered, "because it would reveal the contract." Her voice cracked, and the truth hit her with brutal clarity. She was the weakest point in his life, the easiest to attack, the easiest to blame. Adrian reached for her, but she moved away. "I cannot ruin your reputation," she said. "I will not be the reason your board turns against you." "Lena," he said, lowering his voice, "do not walk away from me." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "This was a mistake. I thought I could handle your world, but I cannot. I thought I could protect myself, but I cannot. I do not belong here." "You do," he insisted. But she shook her head, stepping farther from him. "If I stay, I make things worse for you. If I leave, at least you can clean up the story." "Do not do this," Adrian said, a rare crack in his voice. But it was too late. Lena took off the ring the stylist had chosen, placing it gently on the counter between them. "Thank you for trying to help me," she whispered, "but I cannot be part of this anymore." And before Adrian could stop her, she turned and walked out of the penthouse, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallway, leaving behind the man who had begun to feel far less like a contract and far more like something real. Lena returned to her small apartment that night, the one-bedroom space she had been fighting so hard to keep. The thin walls, the shaky heater, the faint hum of traffic outside. It all felt strangely comforting after the glittering chaos of Adrian's world. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty spot where the ring had been. For a few hours, she let herself believe that walking away was the right thing. But across the city, Adrian Hale was not letting go. In his penthouse office, the leaked footage played again, every angle, every frame. He watched the moment Lena recoiled from his initial offer. He watched the fear in her eyes. He watched himself pull back out of respect. The truth was right there, visible to anyone who dared to look closely. And yet the world had spun a lie. Adrian stood abruptly. "Daniel," he said, "schedule a press conference, tonight." Daniel blinked. "Sir, the board will try to stop you. They will insist you remain silent." Adrian's expression hardened. "Then they can watch." 2 hours later, cameras flashed under the bright lights of the Hale Tower atrium. Reporters crowded the floor, waiting for the statement that was already causing a stir online. Adrian stepped to the podium, not with the cool distance he normally wore, but with raw determination. "I will address the rumors directly," he said. "The woman you have seen in those videos, Lena Ward, did not manipulate me. She did not pursue me. She did not use me." His voice carried through the room, steady and deliberate. "The truth is this. I am the one who approached her. I am the one who offered a contract. And I am the one who made decisions that put her in the spotlight. She owes this world nothing. I am the one responsible." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adrian continued. "I will not allow her name to be dragged through the mud for something she never asked for. If you need someone to blame, blame me, but leave her out of it." The atrium erupted in noise. Cameras flashed wildly. Daniel exhaled with disbelief. The board members watching from the balcony looked stunned. Adrian stepped back from the podium, just as the final sentence echoed across the hall. "And for the record, she is the most honest, dignified woman I have ever known." Meanwhile, in her small apartment, Lena sat frozen, watching the live stream on the cracked screen of her phone. She pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to breathe. She had expected him to salvage his reputation. She had expected him to correct the narrative. She had not expected him to protect her at the cost of everything he had built. A knock pulled her from the screen. She opened the door slowly. Adrian stood in the hallway, without a suit, without a guard, without the armor he wore in public. He looked almost human in the dim light. "Lena," he said quietly, "the contract is over." Her chest tightened. I understand." He shook his head gently. "No. I tore it apart. Every page." Her breath caught. "I will not bind you with rules. Not anymore," he said. "If you stay, it must be because you choose me, not because a contract said you had to." Silence wrapped around them like a fragile thread. For the first time, he was not asking as a businessman, or a millionaire, or a man desperate to protect his empire. He was asking as Adrian, a man who had finally learned what it meant to risk his heart. Lena stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak. Adrian's words echoed in the narrow apartment hall, soft yet carrying the weight of a promise no contract could ever match. He had torn it apart, every page, every rule, every line that once held them at a distance. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice trembling, "why would you risk everything for me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because for the first time in years, I am not afraid of the truth." He stepped closer, the dim hallway light catching the quiet sincerity in his eyes. "You changed something in me, Lena. You made me want to choose honesty over control, vulnerability over power. I cannot lose that. I cannot lose you." Her breath caught. The man who once hid behind walls of wealth and strategy was now standing in front of her with nothing but his heart exposed. Slowly, Lena reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers with a gentleness she had never expected from a man who commanded corporations. "I did not want to walk away," she admitted. "I just wanted to protect you." "And I wanted to protect you," he replied. "But protection means nothing if it keeps us apart." A fragile silence settled between them, then slowly melted into something warm, steady, and real. "Lena," Adrian said softly, "come home." Her eyes stung with emotion. "Only if it is not a contract anymore." "It never will be again," he promised. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, and Adrian pulled her into a quiet embrace in the hallway of her small apartment. The kind of embrace that did not need wealth or status to feel whole. 2 weeks later, they held a small ceremony at a community garden near the river. No grand ballroom, no flashing cameras, just a handful of close friends, soft string music, and sunlight drifting through the trees. Lena wore a simple ivory dress. Adrian wore a navy suit that matched the first night she met him. But this time, there were no walls around him, no mask, no distance. When the officiant asked for their vows, Adrian took her hands and said, "I asked you once to marry me for 6 months. Today, I ask you for a lifetime." Lena smiled through fresh tears. "And today, I finally get to say yes for the right reason." He slipped a new ring onto her finger, one chosen not for its price, but for its quiet beauty. A ring that symbolized choice, not obligation. As the ceremony ended, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "No contracts, no rules, just love, just us." Lena pressed her forehead to his, her voice barely above a breath. "Just us." And in that moment, the world felt perfectly aligned, not because a millionaire had chosen a girl from a modest life, but because two people had chosen each other freely, honestly, and without fear. Their story had begun as an agreement, but it ended as something real, something neither of them had ever dared to hope for. A forever written not on paper, but in the quiet truth of two hearts finally unafraid to belong.